Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this week's final edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show this evening, a week of drama in some of the country's municipalities. Residents of Komani take to the streets in their hundreds in service delivery protests that have shut down the town for 2 days. We speak to the MEC of local government in the Eastern Cape. In the Tshwane Metro, the Auditor General has found financial irregularities to the tune of over 10 billion rands in the financial year 2021-2022. We speak to the MMC for Finance.
Councillor Thapelo Ahmad is the duly elected mayor of the City of Johannesburg municipality.
In the game of mayoral musical chairs, Thapelo Ahmad is now the new mayor of the City of Johannesburg. He won with the mayoral chain by 138 votes. Tonight we look at the issues raised in this municipality through the eyes of those closest to the story, including the mayor himself. And
all of you, therefore, as objectively the best which the EFF has to offer in terms of leadership and capacity, must know that you are in service of the millions of Africans who came before us and fought for our dignity. And
EFF leader Julius Malema gives marching orders to his troops in a year that looks like it's going to be very eventful on the back of electricity supply issues and a whole host of other things. The Watchdog starts now. The large-scale community protests against service delivery and extensive power cuts in Komani in the Eastern Cape has been suspended until further notice. Residents took to the streets again today. A memorandum of demands and a 14-page petition was handed to Cooperative Governance MEC Zorile Williams this afternoon. The protesters want to hear directly from COGTA Minister Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Lubabalo Dada has that story.
People power bringing the town to a standstill for 2 days. They want the national government to step in.
We need to sit down and give feedback because remember, we are depending on the response that will come from Dr. Nkosazana Zuma. So when we get the feedback from them, we will tell the community. After telling the community, then we will then decide what will happen from Monday to Friday.
The local business sector has mixed feelings about the protest.
As business and as residents of this town, we agree with the reason for the protest. What business doesn't like is the fact that the protesters are wanting the businesses to shut down. And what happened today was we met with the protesters and we agreed that before something like this happens again, we will meet, we will discuss how it's going to transpire, and if they want us to join, we can join for a period of time, but we can't close our businesses for 2 days.
The protesters also want the Inokumgijima Municipal Council dissolved. Lubabalo Dada, SABC News, Komani.
Well, joining me now is Eastern Cape COGTA MEC Zorile Williams, who was handed a memorandum by the leaders of the Komani protests this afternoon. MEC, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to the viewers of your show.
Well, let's start perhaps with what the protesters told you this afternoon were the problems and how they want them dealt with.
Yes, Vuyo, thanks for the opportunity to explain my meeting with the protesters of Inokumgijima. Vuyo, I was sent by the Premier to quickly meet with the protesters and listen to their demands. Having met them this afternoon, Vuyo, I have come to a conclusion that the concerns they were raising were genuine. First, Vuyo, they are talking about the municipality's inability to deliver services in respect of water and sanitation. The water in that municipality is erratic and not consistent, and therefore they wanted a sustainable source of water. And that is linked, Vuyo, to electricity, which in the majority of time in the past 2 months, electricity has been facing problems where the transformers are bursting. When they were telling me it's plus minus 4 transformers that were bursting in the town and therefore affecting electricity. And thirdly, potholes, Vuyo. And I really concluded that indeed the concerns were genuine and nobody must really put blame on the protesters when they are exercising their constitutional right to raise their concerns about the inability of the municipality to deliver services to them. That's where you know we engaged with them, Vuyo, and they indicated to me that they wanted the Minister of Cooperative Governance, Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, to come to Enoch Mgijima, and the primary objective of the protesters is that the municipality must be dissolved. I must hasten to indicate for you that after meeting the protesters, I quickly summoned the executive mayor of the municipality to try and understand as to why the municipality was unable to deliver what should be something that is a right of the communities in his jurisdiction. And his response to me, he showed me a clear plan that the municipality had already restored electricity in the majority of the town. And I quickly wanted a walkabout in that respect with his technical team, and I could really see that the electricity was restored, except for the load shedding that the municipality suffered whilst we were on a walkabout. Secondly, his commitment is that within the next week, the team that is going to attend to potholes, 2 teams have been appointed, and they will be working day and night, literally day and night, to attend to the challenges that the municipality is facing. And water services, the mayor of the district municipality, I've also interacted with him immediately to say they must ensure that water is provided to communities. And the only challenge, Vuyo, in Enoch Mgijima relates to the link between the electricity and the water systems. When the electricity is not working, it then affects water. So they may need alternative energy sources in order to ensure that water is running if electricity has challenges. So that's a major infrastructure challenge that they are facing there. Thank you.
Now, if indeed, as you are suggesting, MSC, these matters were being attended to, what then is the explanation for what we've seen throughout this week?
No, Vuyo, the people of Enoch Mgijima have had a municipality that has been under administration for quite some time, literally under Section 139 administration. And I think the ruling party, in its wisdom, tried to intervene in response to the January 8 statement, which indicates the year of decisive action as presented by the president. And then new leadership was installed. And I am realizing that, Vuyo, the commitment of the mayor is glaring. He wants to do something right for that community. However, unfortunately, his commitment converges with the impatience of the people, and therefore now his work cannot be realized and seen because the people have taken time to get to the stage where they say enough is enough. And I'm saying, Vuyo, the concerns are genuine, but we need that dedicated commitment, as the Mayor Papiana is showing. We need that commitment in order to change the situation for the better. But we can't stand against the cries of the people. What the government will do is to resolve the challenges that the people of Inogujima are facing.
But MSC, as you've just pointed out, I mean, this municipality is currently under administration. And it took a while for even that to happen. And I mean, you know, a few days ago, you confronted with people who have taken to the streets. The mayor grants an interview where he says that he is not responsible for the things that they're complaining about. He wasn't there. He's not the cause, or these things didn't happen, you know, under his watch. I mean, not only was that, I mean, irresponsible, even though he went further to then say he will attend to the problems and so on. But those are not the kinds of things he should be saying to people who, as you yourself has just admitted, have every right to feel, and I mean, the way they are feeling. That to me suggests that, I mean, he's not the kind of leadership material that your party should be putting in charge, especially in volatile situations as the one we've seen in that municipality this week. He was tone deaf, and he didn't show leadership, I would argue.
Look, Vuyo, communication is quite an intricate subject, and we have just advised the executive mayor to use the municipal spokesperson in order to assist him to handle the media. So the comments that he was raising, I would agree with you, Vuyo, are uncalled for, and the president has called on all of us to be humble and present ourselves humbly to the people of this country and the municipalities and the areas where we are deploying. Such a message is not what we should be bringing to our people. And I am agreeing with you that we have managed that process to say the spokesperson must be assisting the executive mayor in order to be able to present what his commitment is in that jurisdiction. Because when he presents that commitment to me and the executive mayor of Crisani, it seems that there's real commitment and the energy to change things for the better.
But I mean, a spokesperson, MSC, is not a replacement for, it's not there to replace the duly elected public representatives from, one, making sure that they appear to, like, in front of the people and get them to understand what the challenges are if they are not as yet able to attend to their problems immediately. You need the connection. You need these elected public representatives to go out there, meet the people, speak to them. And unfortunately, in fairly, I don't want to say like Komani is a small town or place, but relatively speaking, when you look at metros, for example, or when you compare them to metros, it's a much smaller place where it's relatively easy, I would argue, to interact with people. Now, instead of interacting, you know, with these people, there are all these suggestions or allegations that, I mean, he didn't give a damn. He just went to like and sat that he should be in, or his favorite should be in, and I mean that's all that he cared about. Now those things matter. In other words, interacting with the people is an important part of his job. Something that shouldn't be outsourced to spokespersons and other people. Spokespersons are there for people like me when we want information, from the municipality, and accurate information that we can then disseminate to the people. But it is not a replacement for leadership. It is not a replacement for commitments that should be made to those people in front of them, with them listening to their elected public representatives.
Yeah, Vuyo, I have agreed that sometimes there are unintended consequences in the message you would want to send to the public. I do not think the executive mayor meant harm when he was saying he was not responsible for the potholes. And I'm saying that message should not have been said. It's incorrect. And secondly, the public participation process, he is engaging on it, Vuyo, in that municipality. Let alone that he was asked about whether he met the communities. He indeed is meeting communities. He showed me a report because I wanted accountability in respect of public participation. But somewhat, Vuyo, the challenge relates to not everyone is able to handle the media. And I'm saying we wanted some capacity, because the mayor is fairly new, Vuyo, and I would not want to pass a heavy judgment on him. He would make mistakes, but we must judge him on what he's bringing to the municipality. But the message is clearly uncalled for, and public participation is the route to go. And the spokesperson suggestion that we have made does not replace his responsibility and duty. But as a new person in the job, we must accept that there will be sometimes challenges, but given time and the situation being calmer in the municipality, the mayor may actually take his responsibility quite seriously going forward.
I don't want to labor the point, MEC, but there may well be no harm meant or intended. Certainly, from the comments, he made in the one interview that people have been talking about on social media, and elsewhere. But I would argue that it comes from a certain place. Such comments come from a certain place. And that place is the kind of place that South Africans have gotten sick and tired of. Precisely because such people get away with saying such things and without facing consequences for the kinds of things they say and the way they act, and they get away with it. And that's the reason we are where we are. Some of these things can actually be avoided by, as you were saying earlier, is what your president told the cadres of your party, just by being humble. In other words, even if you feel, that you have a vocabulary, that can get you out of a corner, but humility and not taking things for granted, respecting the ratepayer, those things are important. And it becomes a responsibility of people like you as the leadership of the political end, of course, leadership of that a province to make sure that your deployees understand that, because if they do, then respect is accorded them, respect is accorded you as the provincial leadership of the province, and there will then be no need for people to feel that people like you will do nothing about their plight. Hence, they're insisting on the National Minister of Cooperative Governance to come and address their concerns. But what that suggests is that not only do they no longer feel that he is or he will be able to attend to their issues, but they also feel, or equally, that people like you, people like the Premier, who deployed you, who's also the chairperson of the ANC in the province, are not up to scratch.
Not really, Vuyo. As I'm saying, I believe that the mayor is under pressure. And when the statement was made, it was the beginning of this whole protest action. And I'm saying, Vuyo, sometimes we respond differently in situations where pressure is exerted. And I don't deny that as leadership, you should be able to absorb the pressure. But at no point you should show arrogance against your own community.
Exactly.
And I am saying the arrogance shown was misplaced and incorrect, and it's something that I am saying without any fear of contradiction was incorrect and wrong and should not be said to anyone in our communities. And my view, Vuyo, is that we must be humble and present ourselves with humility to the people where we're leading. And that's what I have shared with the mayor when I met him. And that's where the proposals of support in terms of communication came up, because we're trying to prevent further damage to the people of Mgijima. And Vuyo, I would really want us to go forward and ensure that those people get the services they deserve. But I must hasten to say, Vuyo, the protest action there was peaceful. And they told me that it was not their intention to ban any of the structures, offices of government in the town. Theirs was to focus on service delivery. That's why they did not even stop vehicles in the N6 from moving up and down. And I'm saying, Vuyo, it is such protests that where people, we can realize that there's maturity in handling the anger. And I'm saying, as leadership, we need to respond to the call when our people call us in such situations, and they do so in a disciplined way.
I've taken a lot of your time than was the original intention, but very briefly, MEC, so the protests have now been suspended, and what's going to happen next in terms of whatever agreement, loose or tight, that you may have reached with the community? In other words, what's the next and second step, if we can just confine it to those for now?
Thank you, Vuyo. The protest action, the shutdown, will come to a standstill from today, ever since I have met them. They are going to give me 5 days to process the petition to the minister and the premier, and then I must indicate to them as to when the cooperative governance minister will be coming down to meet with them. And so for now, the protest action has stopped, Vuyo, because we are working on the demands they have made.
Okay. MEC, thanks very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Vuyo.
Really appreciate it. MEC for Cooperative Governance in the Eastern Cape, Zolile Williams. Of course, I mean, this week has been quite rough for the people of Mgijima in Komani in the Eastern Cape. They feel that they are not being listened to. They took to the streets, and some of the scenes we saw, certainly from the clips that were doing the rounds on social media, were not pleasant. But thankfully, that community didn't destroy infrastructure, didn't prevent children from going to school, and so on. So hopefully their demands will indeed be attended to. After the break, in the Tshwane Metro, the Auditor General has found financial irregularities to the tune of over 10 billion rands in the financial year 2021-2022. We speak to the MMC responsible for finance in the Metro. The Auditor General has flagged financial mismanagement to the tune of 10 billion rands in the financial year 2021-2022. The report found that the municipality failed to account for millions of rands it claimed to have spent on service delivery. Joining us now to look at this issue is Peter Sutton, who is the City of Tshwane's MMC for Finance. Good evening, MMC. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, sir. Good evening to your viewers.
It is such an adverse audit opinion from the AG. How did it get to that point?
Well, look, we're busy with further investigations, but it's indeed a very, very big disappointment to us to have received this audit opinion, especially if we think back to the 2021 financial year, which was concluded in March of last year, which was still an unqualified audit. So the way that it regressed in such a short period of time, it's very concerning, and we are investigating continuously to get to the bottom of it.
Concerning it should, but were there no signs? In other words, as the political leadership of the municipality that is supposed to play an oversight role, did you not see this coming? Were there no red flags? Were there no things that we were worried about even before the Auditor General could express this opinion?
We've received the financial reports on a monthly basis. There was nothing alarming to point to the fact that it was financial misconduct in those financial reports. We were always concerned, obviously, about the liquidity and the solvability of the municipality. We were concerned about the debtors book. We were concerned about creditors, and those aspects were raised. However, the financial misconduct was a matter that was not picked up in any of our oversight structures. In other words, not in impact, not in the Section 79 committees, not in council. And so it's a major concern, and that's why we're continuously investigating now to get to the bottom of that.
You know, whenever the Auditor General releases her reports, one of the things that often come up is whether or not municipalities, and the same applies, for example, to provinces and even in the national legislature, as to whether the people who are supposed to play the oversight roles do actually have the wherewithal to be able to exercise. In other words, in certain instances, there's an acceptance that there may well be the will to actually play the oversight role, but whether indeed, the people who are supposed to play the oversight role have the capacity, and the knowledge to actually play that oversight role is often a different story altogether. What do you think is the situation when it comes to Tshwane? But some people would argue that, given the amounts involved and how the Auditor General has counted this, there should have been signals somewhere. Even if you may not have been able to put a finger on it, because then the Auditor General, people sort of go through things with a fine comb and, of course, with all the skills and the knowledge. But the fact that you couldn't see any red flags is perhaps what should be alarming, because remember, you are the you are the people who are well poised, to be able to, and have the mandate, one should add, to be able to spot some of these things and say, something doesn't make sense here. What is it?
The very alarming aspect, and to answer your question firstly, I think we do have the skills. I don't think it's a fact that we don't have the skills or the political will to do oversight. What's very alarming, what the Auditor General determined in their audit opinion, is the fact that many of the or the aspects that they've pointed to is financial misconduct. Now, on the political structures, we get to do oversight, as you correctly point out. But if the information that's provided to the politicians are misled or are deliberately misled, or in this case, as the Auditor General have found, financial misconduct, it's very difficult for the politicians to pick up on that, as we do not have access to the actual information, the actual audit work. And you will recall from previous discussions and interviews, there are provisions in law that prohibits politicians from interfering into the administration. So in other words, to get directly in there, looking at the documents. And there's obviously very good reasons why you want to keep the politicians out of that sphere as well. But yes, I think to conclude on your question, we certainly, as a multi-party coalition, have to look deep and assess our oversight role, because yes, it's not good enough to say we didn't pick it up. Yes, there are reasons where I think we've been misled, but that will be determined by the investigations going on. There's a number of forensic investigations going on. The Auditor General will be back next week in the city of Tshwane to do the first interim audit for the first 6 months of this financial year, so that we can determine where the problems are. And then we seriously need to look at how we do our oversight, how we conduct that, and what measures we can put in place to avoid the catastrophe like we have seen now.
Just to conclude a point here, MMC, remember the whole point, or your role isn't just about perhaps outing, the wrongdoers or exposing them. It is also preventative. In other words, you are there to prevent the worst from happening, which is what is the situation here. Often, I remember speaking to the Deputy Minister of Finance here on the program not too long ago, where he was talking about decisions that politicians often take. That you would get someone, let's say in your office, you would have an office full of advisors of one sort or the other. But in his observation, you'd find that often the people that politicians would enlist or want to be employed as advisors aren't people who or whose skills or expertise speak to the core business of what you as politicians should be doing, which in part is this oversight role. In other words, people will have all sorts of advisors, political, media, and other areas, but wouldn't have, for instance, an engineering expert, if engineering is part of you, is what you're dealing with. Or in this instance, you wouldn't have a financial or accounting guru who's able to say the numbers don't tally, and is able to say to you, these are the questions that you need to be asking, and this is how you should be asking them, and so on and so forth. Do you not think that that is perhaps one of the shortcomings that you have in the system, and perhaps it's about time that people like you deal with those or tackle those issues head on?
I think I agree in part with you. And as I pointed out earlier, we certainly need to look at ourselves on how we do oversight and how we can improve on it. I did make the point that it's not good enough that we did not pick this up. Although I think there's very good reasons for it, we need to do better. But on your point, where I do want to agree, and I think our sphere of government in local government is slightly different from the Deputy Minister you've interviewed before. In our case, if you look back historically in the city of Tshwane, where I do agree with the minister, the deputy minister, is the fact that in the city of Tshwane, we did not have a city manager for a very long time, or a municipal manager. And that's a very, very critical part. And that's the most powerful person in local government, in a municipality. You know, since 2019, we've had about 7, up until 2020, about 7 people who acted in that position. We then had an acting city manager or municipal manager for 2 years. And it's only recently in September last year that we appointed a full-time city manager in the city of Tshwane. And I think many of our other positions in local government in the city of Tshwane have been in acting positions, haven't been filled full-time. Now, why am I saying this? I think this has a major impact. And I think it has to do with the skills and the capacity, as you have correctly pointed out. And then secondly, it's also accountability. I think what we have seen now, when people are in acting positions, the question has to be asked, do they really take it as seriously as they need to, as a person who is full-time in that position? And then thirdly, and it's not shifting the blame, but it's a fact, and that's been pointed out by the Auditor General as well, is consequence management. And I just want to make one small correction, if you will allow me. The Auditor General, the 10 billion irregular expenditure is slightly misinterpreted. The Auditor General did not find 10 billion rand irregular expenditure in the city of Tshwane. The correct figure is 1.2 billion. Not that that's even acceptable. I'm not trying to justify that 1.2 billion is acceptable, but it's certainly not 10 billion. The 10 billion is a cumulative figure since about 2011, roughly about 2011, up until now. It's a cumulative figure. And one of the aspects that the Auditor General has been very strict on in this audit opinion is that we have not done enough to reduce that amount through investigations, through consequence management, where we recoup that money from those who were responsible for it, or where it can't be recouped, to write it off. So that's how the 10 billion should be interpreted. And it comes back to consequence management. So I think what the Deputy Minister pointed out in your space applies to the city of Tshwane, just in a slightly different manner than it would apply to provincial and national government.
Well, lastly, presumably the Auditor General sort of gives you a sense of where to look in terms of people who may be the possible culprits here, but also gives you a sense of their modus operandi. Now, have you been able to sort of start saying, it could be here, it could be here, it could be this one, could be that one, and this is what we're going to do to make sure that those people don't do further damage, but also don't try to influence things so that they, hide their tracks, or that kind of a thing. But importantly, which is a point you spoke about just now, how then you're going to ensure that there'll be consequences.
Definitely we have. The key part, I think, if we have to summarize the entire audit opinion in one key part, which is certainly what I see it, is the Auditor General basically concluded that there are absolute no systems of control and internal controls in the city of Tshwane to prevent and to detect irregularities and fraud. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is this by design, or is this just by negligence? In other words, bad management, or is it due to lack of skills or a wrong structure? Those aspects need to be determined, and that's what we're investigating. But coming back to, I think, the point you're trying to make and asking me to answer now is that we need to implement that consequence management, and I think that's what the Auditor General is very strict. So yes, we have identified. The Auditor General didn't give us enough specifics to point to individuals in other aspects. He was very clear about financial misrepresentation and misconduct. That's been very clear. But obviously, we need to investigate further to determine the extent, for instance, in supply chain, why we have the problems we have in supply chain, why we have the problems, for instance, in our creditors payable, financial controls. I mean, if you can't even get a cash flow statement to balance, that's a major concern. Is it the skills, as you have pointed out, and then also why did the wheels come off as badly as it did now, and not previously? So yes, that certainly needs to be done. We need to investigate that. So the point I'm making is the Auditor General did give us an idea where to look and what we need to focus on, but he didn't specifically point to individuals in those cases. We need to determine that and then take those consequence management. And the last point, if you will just quickly allow me in 5 seconds, I think what we've seen is exactly what you point out. There's room for improvement, but if we don't show the correct improvement in the next 5 months before 30 June in this financial year, we could very well be facing another adverse opinion. And that's a major concern to me and an aspect that we've been speaking consistently about in the last month. We mustn't assume in the city of Tshwane that we're going to improve. It's going to take a lot of hard work. And if we don't focus on the correct things that the Auditor General needs us to correct, it can certainly just be a lot worse for us in the next financial year. And that's a major concern and why we have gone to the extent about all the interventions that we have put in place now.
Mr. Peter Sutton, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and to your viewers as well. Have a lovely evening.
Here's the City of Tshwane's MMC for Finance on the back of that report by the Auditor General, which flagged financial mismanagement in the municipality. To this now, the newly elected City of Johannesburg Mayor, Thapelo Ahmad, has pledged to try and unite the council and do better for the citizens of the city. He was speaking after his election earlier today. Ahmad won by 138 votes. The DA's Mpho Phalatse received 81 votes, and Action SA's Funzi Ngobeni got 46. Ahmad from Al Jamaa has promised to honor the city's residents.
We formed the basis for a revolutionary movement whose ultimate aim is to achieve the state power in order to implement a socialist program that will usher in economic liberation of our people. We consult...
Okay, apologies for that wrong soundbite. We were supposed to play a soundbite of the incoming mayor of the city of Johannesburg. I don't know if we have it. Do we have the right? I don't know if we have the right soundbite now. But if we don't have the right soundbite, that's okay. It's not a problem. Apologies for that. But also let me also apologize for not having the incoming mayor. He was supposed to come. He stood us up at the very last minute. He told us that he could no longer come to studio for that scheduled interview. To this now, the Economic Freedom Fighters is hosting its 4th National People's Assembly in Kempton Park. Julius Malema, the party's leader, is giving an opening address. Let's leave you with that speech.
Against the anti-colonial Mau Mau rebels in Kenya. In Zambia, we have seen the newly elected president surrendering the country to the mercy of the World Bank and its concessional loans, one that amounts to $275 million, further entrenching African dependency on the parasitic institutions which dictate economic policy in the country. The oppositions which are emerging in the continent as the liberation movements die do not seem to be revolutionary in content and in character. And this is a threat that we must guard against here in South Africa as well. The death of the ANC must be managed by a progressive left, which is led by the EFF, lest the country be thrown into the right-wing regression. Comrades, our people continue to be persecuted in Eswatini, most recently culminating in the murder of a human rights activist, Thulani Maseko. The regime of Mswati has grown in arrogance and requires much more confrontation and solidarity by all of us in the region and the continent. That Mswati is embraced by the political establishment in South Africa and invited to events of significance, revealed that the ruling party in South Africa will sacrifice the cause of human rights in the face of political expediency. We, as the EFF, must therefore lead the charge and bring the struggle in Eswatini to its finality. Our international relations must begin to meaningfully mobilize international solidarity for the people of Eswatini, beginning for a call on financial embargoes against businesses of Mswati. Mswati must financially be isolated from trade and business in the SADC region, the continent and the world, as the first step towards his ultimate removal and imprisonment. We must begin to take the EFF into the continent in a much more meaningful manner to avoid political chance takers utilizing the name and brand of the EFF for personal wealth accumulation. This plenum must provide decisive direction on how the organization can build meaningful and strategic relations in the continent in a way that will benefit the organization in the war to be waged in 2024. Commissars and fighters, we must be able to strike a delicate balance between imperative to condemn that anti-women rights Taliban regime in Afghanistan, while understanding the devastating impact of imperialist meddling by the USA and United Kingdom in the political instability in the region. It is an objective fact that chaos was created in Afghanistan and across Middle East in search for supposed terrorists and non-existing weapons of mass destruction. This chaos has created to ease the extraction of oil in the region, and as a result, the Middle East has never known peace since those interventions which were based on greed. The regimes in the Middle East, however, continue to practice crude, conservative forms of religion which spill over into governance and create an environment where women are denied opportunities to education, jobs, and skills development. We do not align with this. We must begin to speak with a much stronger voice in that regard. Our position with regard to ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine remain the same, and as the terrorist organization known as NATO consolidates itself to further arm Ukraine and encroach on the security of Russia, we must, as the left, condemn and expose NATO. At the current moment, NATO is violating all agreements which were reached at the end of the Cold War, which was to not further expand its influence towards the East. NATO is currently the principal aggressor in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and we must develop and popularize this position and never show any confusion in this regard. Those of you who have a hotline with Morocco, you must tell them that we are on the side of the people of Western Sahara. For as long as the people of Western Sahara are not given their rightful land, we will never rest to fight for the return of the land of the Sahrawi people. Fellow fighters, Israel remains an apartheid state, and we will never know peace and democracy for as long as Palestinians are still robbed and oppressed by Israel. We will never be on the side of the powerful, because our founding manifesto requires us to always be on the side of the weak. Commissars and fighters, the process for the 2024 national and provincial elections begins today. The Central Command team has outlined and expressed that the primary objective of the year 2023 will be massive voter registration. This is because the victory of the EFF remains impossible if we are going to compete for an electoral base that we did not register and did not choose to be part of the voter system to vote for the EFF. We need to establish our own voter base so that we know we have a dependable and trusted voters who know that the EFF is the only viable option for government and have been introduced to the voting system by the EFF. This means that all structures and public representatives and individuals within structures must receive mandates to register people to vote on a daily basis. The 2024 elections will be the most defining since 1994, as we expect to bring the ruling party under 50% nationally. Therefore, all of us must prepare for the reality of coalitions to define our national political landscape. Commissars and fighters, we have seen at local government the instability that characterizes governance, wherein there is a shift almost on a monthly basis. As the leadership, we have resolved that the EFF can no longer afford to be on the touchlines of governance, as our people will question what role we have played in governance as we head to the 2024 election. We are therefore constantly engaged in meetings with opposition parties, trying to find ways not only to stabilize the situation, but to equally ensure the EFF gains the necessary governance experience. One of abnormalities we have identified is that the Racist Democratic Alliance, which at every opportunity insults the EFF and refused to work with us, occupied leadership roles in all of the metropolitans of Gauteng province. They have since been removed in Johannesburg, and the reality is that they will likely be removed across the metros in a bid to ensure that they are taught humility and that this organization of ours gets the necessary governance experience. The reality, comrades, is that we have been the most generous organization to all opposition political parties, and this favor has not been returned at any level. This rings true in many years, even where you will think we'll get experience through deputy mayors in KwaZulu-Natal, where our deputy mayors have no clear responsibility. They are just given titles and bodyguards, yet they don't have any role to play. Here and now, we must say without any fear of contradictions, all our deputy mayors under the IFP must resign with immediate effect, and we are no longer working with the IFP. We thought that apartheid collaborator has changed its spots, but it has come very clear that the apartheid collaborator IFP is not ready to change. The IFP must not get anything everywhere where we are involved. Be Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, Mogale City, anywhere you see the ugly head of the IFP, put it aside.